Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Welcome into the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers, and we're talking Seahawks football. And welcome into the show, Keith. I'm really glad you're here to talk football because, you know, it hasn't been the best day for me, Keith. I sent you a picture earlier, and you just saw how miserable I was.
Yeah, you looked absolutely miserable out there on the golf course in the middle of the day. You know, with all that sun. I don't know how you made it through it.
Oh. I'm still there right now. It was wonderful. I mean, I haven't played for, over a month, which is tough in Arizona because every corner there's a golf course. And, but it was nice to get out there and did the whole solo thing, met up with two or three other folks that were out there trying to do the same thing I was, which was just kind of put everything away for 4 or 5 hours and get out there and hit the ball. And I did okay. I pretty much nailed my average, which is not great, but that's okay for me because I'm just having fun. So,
yeah. Don't you think it's weird that there's so many golf courses in the state that has almost no water? Yeah,
and people complain about it, and it's really bad right now too because of the influx of immigration that the country or that the state has. I'm not talking about outside the country immigration. I'm talking about migration from other states. Mm-hmm. And everybody's just really on edge about the water thing because there's a legit water shortage coming up because of the lack of rain for, quite a few years in a row now. And then the golf courses, you're right, they suck up all the water. And some of them are pretty decent about it in the summertime where they let things go a little bit more and they charge less, to get on because it's so darn hot. But something's got to give. I just don't see how it's a sustainable system.
Yeah.
They've got to reuse water or something. I don't know, like require golf courses to reuse water or not have as much grass and reduce the narrowness or width of the fairways or whatever it is, but something's.
Well, that was one of the things when I lived down there is that the courses were going to more of a desert course feel where it was, there were landing areas and you had to hit your spots because if you missed your spot, you were out in the cactus and rock
right.
and
you're not going to find your ball.
Yeah.
And you don't want to go find your ball either with all the
you don't want to.
and stuff.
But yeah, so there's a lot of that. And then, yeah, there were places that were using, gray water. So partially treated, sewer water and using that to keep everything green. And they did what they had to do. But that was, more than a decade ago, and it's only gotten worse.
So how about you?
I spent the whole day at work. Except for looking at pictures of you out on the golf course that you sent me.
I had to send one or two,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Running around at work and I'm like, I'm going to have to kill Bill later.
That's funny. So today's show, we're going to do kind of go around the NFC and look at the other teams in pretty decent depth. And we're going to have a conversation about Julio Jones. Like everybody's talking about Julio Jones. The trade rumors are out there. Atlanta's definitely, it appears to be moving on from Julio Jones. Julio Jones has kind of come out in a iffy recording. They probably should not have put him on live if they didn't tell him he was going to be live. But he indicated that he didn't want to be back. He's as good as gone, basically. And there's been like 20 teams associated with acquiring Julio Jones. Seattle is one of them. Although there's a distinction with Seattle in that it was nationally reported that Seattle has been in discussions with Atlanta to trade for Julio Jones. And so that kind of sets them apart from, probably 18 of those other teams. There's 2 or 3 mentioned kind of in the same breath as Seattle in that. And let's start the conversation there, Keith, with regards to the immediate news of this week of Seattle being at least in the game to acquire him. And I have mixed feelings about this. I kind of wrote a little piece and put it on our website a couple days ago about Julio Jones, and does it really make sense for the Seahawks to be seriously considering that move, given a couple of the other, maybe you could perceive as roster holes remaining, and then what the talent pool looks like in the wide receiver room and at tight end and so forth, playmakers, which Seattle really, it would be a kind of a luxury acquisition to me if Julio Jones came. Obviously, it would make us a little better, and it would kind of stack that wide receiver room pretty well. Probably the best wide receiver room in the NFL. But is it necessary to get Seattle to the Super Bowl versus maybe acquiring a starting caliber corner of, say, Stephon Gilmore's caliber, or Richard Sherman, or bringing back KJ Wright? A few other moves that Seattle could make that might put them in a Super Bowl conversation, even get them even further. And so I want your take. Like, Keith, where do you stand on Julio Jones? I know how you feel about him as a player, but how do you feel about him as a potential Seahawk?
Well, so you're talking about one of the top 5 receivers in the league, a guy that's been regularly just generally considered probably the top 2 until he had a last year where he was injured a bunch.
Hamstring.
But he's still probably top 5. And you're talking about getting a guy you compare that to
32 years old as well.
You could look at what they're paying Tyler Lockett, and you're going to be paying him about the same. Yeah, he's 32, and you're getting him for a couple of years, and then he's done. And
I think he's making 15.2 this year, but his cap number goes down into the 9.
Yeah, the year after.
Range the year after. So there is some room there to kind of finagle that contract if you wanted to. And but how does he fit? Like,
I think
okay? So let's split this into 3 conversations: trade compensation,
okay,
salary requirements, and how does he fit in the cap, and then where does he fit on the roster? And if so, if he does come on board, are you involving a player to be traded back, and is that player another wide receiver, or does he fit in the current roster of wide receivers on the roster?
So, okay, let's start with that, right? Well, no, let's start with the salary and compensation, because that we have to get him here before we have to realize what it's going to take. $15 million for cap stuff is really not it's not that much for a guy of that player of that caliber.
You could put this on Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's come out and said, "Hey, Julio, on the phone, I would love to have you on my team. I'd love to throw the football to you." So let's ask Russell Wilson to guarantee himself into Seattle by restructuring his contract, freeing up some cap space, and putting the whole Russell Wilson rumor thing to bed, as well as acquiring a player for him. That makes sense to me on a number of different levels.
Yeah. And so, like, right now they're sitting at 7.5 of cap space. So they would have to do something, but Wilson or Wagner would be the 2 guys that they haven't touched, or Dwayne Brown. Those are the guys they haven't touched and could, or maybe you get
move a player.
Or you get Jamal Adams extension done and lower his cap number. I mean, there's lots of ways to make this happen. Or you move a player. And I would expect the stuff that I've read is that 2 and a player might get it done, depending on the player.
And a player.
Or maybe 2 of 5 and a player if it's not as.
So we're going into next year without a first round pick already. It's approaching a compensation level for the actual, not the pay, but the trade value that we would have to give up. Assets gets to be approaching an unworkable situation for me when we're talking about a 2 and a 5 and a player.
Yeah, see, I don't consider that. I mean, yeah, it would be great to have more draft capital next year, but you're talking about getting a couple years of an absolutely legit guy, making your starting quarterback happy, getting him to sign on for a number of years rather than having all this nonsense going off next year. You put all those things together, and it's worth it. You're talking about.
What do you do with playing time, catches, attempts?
Okay, so as far as that, so yeah, the trade compensation of a 2, a 5, and a player like Cody Barton, do it.
I would do it if a 2 was in 2023, for sure. If it was a 2022 second, I would try to make the 5th contingent.
Then it would be
and I would make it a 2023 as well, because that way the pain is spread out a little bit.
Yeah, but so it would probably have to be a 2022 third, and then a 2022 third, and then a 2023 second. Because
that's just too much, Keith.
Every year you go forward. Every year you go forward, when you start going out, consider it a round lower. So that second round.
I understand that.
The second round pick in 2 years.
I was debating on the 5th round pick to begin with. So now I'm in the definitely, unquestionably, this trade becomes just almost too expensive for me.
I don't understand how it's too expensive.
Well, because you're paying the player, so that you're inheriting a contract. You're trying to integrate this new player. I know it's Julio Jones. I know it's Russell Wilson, but you're trying to integrate the player into a new offense and get him synced up with Russell Wilson. And he's 32 years old. He'll be 33 next year. And you just drafted into the second round. You went and got Eskridge. So you've got Lockett, you've got Metcalf, you've got Eskridge, you've got Swain, you've got Everett as a tight end, pass catching. You've got Parkinson. You've got some running backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield. You got Disley.
Okay, so
what do you need? Like, would you rather have Julio Jones for a second and a third and possibly a player, or would you rather have like Richard Sherman and KJ Wright to complete your defense?
I'd rather have Julio Jones. And here's why. Julio Jones coming to this team that's already got 2 elite guys and some depth, because that's all they've got. They've got 2 elite guys and some depth. And none of the depth
absolutely correct.
None of the depth is that proven. Good. Eskridge has some talent, but
he's a rookie.
Yeah. Well, let's see him produce on the field. So you got 2 elite guys and some depth. What happens if one of the elite guys get hurt?
Yeah, you could make that argument almost any position group in the team.
True, but
quarterback.
You almost injury proof
left tackle.
The passing game, with the exception of Russell Wilson. So you almost injury proof that, because if Julio gets hurt, you still got the other 2 guys. The last 2 years, Lockett's gotten hurt and the offense has fallen off. So this next year, if they get Julio, Lockett gets hurt, guess what? Offense keeps rolling. The other thing is, with that much talent at receiver, teams are going to look at Seattle and they really go, if we don't score 30 points, we can't win. So their game plan is going to be set around trying to keep up with Seattle's offense. Getting a guy like Julio. Now, the offense is still going to be really good if they don't. But getting a guy like Julio and adding him to that mix, it puts the onus on the defense.
That's a lot of pressure to put on a defense. I will admit that.
And they'll just be like, and so the other teams are going to go, our defense will give up points. We can't not. It's just too good. It's too much talent over there. We have to change what we do to try and keep up. And so now they're throwing deep more. Now they're taking more chances. Now you're giving yourself an opportunity to go get more interceptions, or some strip sacks, more sacks. Just you're you're creating things for your defense by forcing them to do something, the other team to do something different offensively.
Are there any other holes on the team besides wide receiver where you could make that argument that you made with regards to if a player goes, we're kind of in trouble? I mean, could you say that about corner? I mean, I know there's depth there, Keith, but is there starting caliber depth?
Well, okay.
What about linebacker beyond Jordan, Brooks, and Wagner?
Where's the biggest impact going to be, right? The passing game?
Yeah, but there's only so many balls to go around.
It doesn't matter. It's not about receptions for each player. It's about yards per game and, yards per attempt. Getting Julio raises that, because it just you get a guy like, you get Julio and you put him opposite DK Metcalf, you put Lockett in the slot, and nobody's blitzing. So now Wilson's got more time because you blitz.
The weird thing is you just opened up your running game and your spread offense.
Yeah. And so it just makes everything better. Sometimes I will
give you the fact that Seattle would end up being a top 2 or 3 offense in the NFL if Julio Jones came and was healthy and was fully integrated. I mean, a lineup of Lockett, Metcalf, and Jones with Eskridge doing some really cool underneath stuff and some end around stuff, some wide bubble screens and all that kind of stuff. That would be a potent offense. You add Gerald Everett and Disley into that thing with Penny receiving the ball out of the backfield. Whew. I mean, that's an offense you can't stop, because the double team situation, like any one of those wide receivers is capable. The top 4 wide receivers are capable of breaking away, creating separation, and operating in space, which is the entire design of the offense.
And so last year, Metcalf, especially once Lockett got hurt, Metcalf was drawing double teams on every play. And the Seahawks couldn't dictate to the defense to make them get out of that alignment.
And they kept trying to throw it long.
Anyway. But they could not dictate to the other team to get them out of that alignment, partly because they couldn't run the ball worth a damn, and partly because, they didn't have anyone. You stick another top receiver like Julio Jones over there, you can't double both of them. You just can't. There's just not enough players on the field.
Last year, Julio Jones played 9 games. He had 51 receptions for 700 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. But that was, a low since his rookie season, basically. But those numbers extrapolated over 16 to 17 games is his career average, plus a few more touchdowns. He's still that player.
It's going to be 120 targets for 98 receptions, yards about 1,200.
So if
5 or 6 touchdowns.
Lockett and Metcalf and Jones evenly split all of the opportunities, each one is going to be slightly reduced from where they were probably at last year, at least as far as the trajectory Jones was on.
Yeah,
now you're going to get Lockett and Metcalf below 1,000 yards. You're going to get below 80 receptions. What does that do to their egos on trying to make all this work? Now I know what you're saying.
No,
if they win the Super Bowl, it doesn't matter, right? If
what does it mean win the Super Bowl? You go out there and you're scoring 35 points a game, and it's like, oh no, I'm only averaging 6.2 catches a game instead of 7.1. Oh my God, it's so terrible that we're scoring 35 points a game. They won't care. None of them are in a contract year. The only time the receivers would care about that is if they're in a contract year and they were desperately trying to show that they were an elite player and worth an elite paycheck.
I think that the big thing here too is that it would automatically, almost in my mind, take the Russell Wilson situation off the table, because there's just no way that he could go anywhere else with this kind of lineup.
Yeah. And so his, there's lots of different components to the Russell Wilson thing, but the fact that he's like, hey, Julio, come to Seattle. And the Seahawks went and did what they had to get him. And not only are they're going to go to Russ and they're going to be like, okay, we can get him, but we need help from you so we can move some money around to make sure we can fit him under the cap. Okay, but that makes trading you next year impossible. You okay with that? Good, let's do it. And so it does. It takes the Russell Wilson issue off the table, keeps him happy, and it injury proofs the passing game next year. And honestly, sometimes you can get a bigger effect by reinforcing a strength than filling a hole. Because you can make the offense so good that having a little bit of a talent deficit at corner is not going to matter as much.
I'm sneakily, as and the longer I become a fan, the more I become a big fan of the defense. Stopping the ball, inflicting your will on a team, all that kind of stuff. I have to admit, the prospect of that offense with Julio Jones is just off the chart as far as the excitement level. I mean, everyone's just going to be pining to get a ticket to that stadium to watch that show, because that is a show. Mm-hmm. And that would be super fun.
And you're not willing to give up a second round pick to make that happen?
It's a difficult decision because I do feel like we're a corner away. I do feel like KJ Wright should be had if it's only going to be for $2.5 million.
They can do that. I do believe that they can do the KJ Wright thing anyway.
I do believe that Julio Jones is 32 years old. I believe that he's going to want some sort of an extension, possibly. I think that Adams needs to get paid. I think that DK Metcalf is wanting to be paid next year when he's in the ballpark for a probably a league setting extension at wide receiver. And so I do realize that there's a lot of cap space coming up next year. They did kind of create a ceiling of that of like $208 or $209 million next year, which is actually lower than it would have been had the cap gone up this year as normal. It would have gone up to that rate this year. So they're kind of falling behind, but nonetheless, it does open it up a little bit. Next year, I think Seahawks will end up probably having close to $60 million, but that's going to get eaten up really quick.
Yeah. See, the thing is, you trade for Julio now. A year from now, his contract. First of all, there's no dead money in it. But you pick a player up in a trade, there's no dead money on it.
Atlanta really has to eat a lot of dead cap space in this deal.
So you got to move. You can move him at any point. If he comes in and plays like a guy who's on the way down and not going to be who he once was, you can move on in a year. You can save that $9 million in cap space, or you can.
Yeah, he's got
trade him
next year.
Trade him to another team.
Out of that $9 million next year, I believe only 2.5 is guaranteed.
Yeah.
So you could, in fact, cut him if you had to. But
and there's 20 teams that want him that have inquired about him now.
True.
You don't think that there's still going to be 8 left next year, a year from now,
even if he has a subpar year. Yeah. I agree.
So, okay, so you trade him for you trade a second for him, and then a year from now you go, it wasn't, or we're not getting out of it what we thought we would. Let's go send him out and we get a third or a fourth back.
The thing with being in a competition with, let's just say it's not 20 teams, but it's 6 teams or 5 teams. Being in a competition for a player for 5 teams where the highest bidder wins is not a great position to be in if you're the Seahawks. So let's talk about the sweetener. It's not a
great position for any of the 6
let's
teams.
Let's say you're right, and that's a second round pick. They want a first. That seems unlikely. Let's say it's a second. Let's say you sweeten it with a 5th, but they also want a player. Let's talk about a couple players that the Seahawks might make available to sweeten the deal.
Rasheem Green, Cody Barton.
Here's the thing. Okay, let's talk about those 2 players first. Here's the thing about Atlanta. They need pass rushers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that they would want Rasheem Green, but he would be put forth onto to the docket from Seattle as part of a trade, I believe.
Okay.
I think that there's another player on the roster that they would want instead.
If you're Seattle and you're negotiating with Atlanta, and I know what player you're going to say, and you come in with a second and a fifth and Rasheem Green, and they said no, they want this other player, and you go, okay, it's going to be a fifth and Alton Robinson, and then the second comes in a year from now,
conditionally,
and is conditional, and it might be a third if Julio ends up doing nothing. Okay, I'm still game. And Alton Robinson is an incredible talent. I see him.
You nailed the player I was thinking about.
Yep.
And that scenario makes a little bit more sense because I don't think Rasheem Green is going to get a deal done. And I think Alton Robinson would.
And
in fact, Alton Robinson might be at this situation as a player where you could get a second and Alton Robinson and skip the fifth.
It might be. I mean, his stats were not like, stellar. But the tape,
he didn't have any. He only played 17% of the snaps. Yeah.
The tape from him was fantastic as a pass rusher.
And he doesn't look like a guy like Benson Mayoa, where if you couldn't, I don't think that you could run him down yet. He's a player that could give you 65 to 70% of the snaps at a strong side linebacker Leo spot, and quite possibly big enough and stout enough to play, the 5-tech.
Yeah, I think that he's a guy that, and he really flashed. His tape is much better than his stat line looks, but he just didn't get a lot of playing time, didn't get a lot of run, and that's because his run defense wasn't great. But there's going to be value there. If Atlanta has watched the tape at all, they're going to like him.
So it would make it even more important for Taylor to be available and to play well this year, because that takes away a strength of your team and turns it in, not necessarily takes it completely away, but it does diminish, because I think all of us have talked about Robinson maybe emerging this year with 7 or 8 sacks on a somewhat larger rotational role, and that's gone. So that's a fairly decent compensation, I think.
Well, you've still got Dunlap on that side. You've still got Mayo on that side, and you've got Daryl Taylor on that side of the line. So you've actually got depth there. To kind of, you're losing a talented player who's young, has upside, and could be part of the team long term and be a big portion of that rotation.
Yeah, because Benson Mayo is going to go away. You could have Alton Robinson and Taylor over there, and that would create a nice tandem.
Yeah, and so you end up. So his value is not just he's going to give you 7 or 8 sacks this year. It's that he's going to give you 7, 8 sacks for the next 3 years. And so that's what you're losing. And he's a hard player to do that, but at the same time, you're taking about a guy who flashed on tape and has talent, but he dropped in the 5th round because of considerable off-field concerns.
Let's say let's say Seattle balks at that, and it's just too much of a price that Seattle's willing to pay. Give me you mentioned Cody Barton. Give me another name besides Cody Barton, because I don't know that Cody would get it done. Not a rotational linebacker. I don't know that has a lot of value. No, he's great in special teams. There's value with that, but there's no guarantee that he was going to come in and start, especially with Taylor dropping back into the strong side. It looks like he would start. So give me another player.
Man, that's harder.
LJ Collier.
Yeah, that would be another one who his name will come up.
Is there anybody on offense? Is there a wide receiver that you would trade as part of a sweetener? And Swain's probably not going to get it done.
Nope. There's the top, right? So the top three, the current top three, Eskridge, Lockett, and
would you trade D. Eskridge?
You can't.
And a 5th round pick.
I don't believe he can be traded right now.
Okay. That's a good clarification. I totally forgot about that stuff.
So players can be traded after they've been selected, right? Think about the Eli Manning situation, until they sign their contract. And then I believe you have to wait. There's a certain number of games before you can trade them. Because anytime someone signs a contract, like if you're a free agent and you sign with a new team, they can't turn around and instantly trade you. I think it's an 8-game window.
God,
now to trade,
if we had a kid like Forsyth in camp last year and he was ready to go this year, you could trade Dwayne Brown straight across almost for Julio Jones.
Or, yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, that's the type of thing that you'd look at. I would say that you're on offense. They're going to ask about Dion Lewis. No. They're going to ask about DK Metcalf, and you need to start laughing.
Oh gosh. Yeah, they're not even on the same planet right now.
Nope. They might ask about Rashad Penny.
And Seattle might pull the trigger on that deal and worry about just backfilling that spot. Yep. Because they've got a couple of guys, undrafted guys that are competing, and there's probably plenty of guys out there still on the market that you could bring in just to fill. Yeah. 100 carries a year type of a guy.
Well, yeah, and you look at we're going to do this, round the NFC West here when we're done with this discussion, and look across between the Rams and the 49ers and the kind of, I mean, the Rams now have Akers, but until he took over that spot, they've got a bunch of also ran guy. I mean, Mozart is a guy that's been cut a lot of times and whatever, and all of a sudden, right. He's like the starter for San Francisco.
They picked up Trey Sermon in the draft. I think that's an undervalue,
but you know what I'm saying? Like you have.
Yeah, because Carson's your guy, but Carson really, he gets banged up. He's good for 12 to 13 games a year and a 17-game schedule. You're going to need a guy. And so Penny has also had injuries, but you're kind of counting on him this year to fill that gap. And then you've got Collins, and to take the heavy load running backs. And then there's, your receiving kind of guys in Homer and Dallas. So,
well, and Dallas has, his college tape says he should be better than he looked last year.
Yeah.
He was very tentative with the zone blocking.
I would definitely run with Carson and Collins, and Dallas would take that kind of third spot.
And you'd give Dallas the opportunity.
Yeah, now I would do that over Alton Robinson. I would do that over Alton, but I don't know what Atlanta's got for running backs right now. I don't have their roster open, but interesting. I mean, so who do you think won the argument, me or you?
I did. Always.
We should actually.
I've never lost an argument with you.
We should. We should go ahead.
The people who aren't watching
announce the trade right now, because Keith, I swear to gosh, as soon as we push stop, the Seahawks are going to swing that trade on after we get done recording, and we'll have to hop on to do some sort of supplemental thing anyway. So we might as well just say
it. So 2 things. One, yes, we should just do that. Seahawks just traded. Why? Because we talked about it. So therefore it's going to happen right after we hit stop, and so therefore this show will be outdated. And the other thing is your face when I said I've never lost an argument with you was hilarious. So the people who aren't watching on YouTube, scroll,
freeze frame that
load it up. We scroll up to about 32 minutes and watch that. That was worth it right there.
Yeah, eyes bulging and a little smirk. All right, so let's take a round trip around the NFC West. So the other teams in the NFC West have also been in this conversation for Julio Jones. Each one of them. I think the Rams may have pulled out of that conversation.
The Rams don't have the ability to get involved.
And they're the team actually that probably needs a player like that the most.
Yes.
which is interesting because you want to give Matthew Stafford an opportunity to have some weapons. And you've got a player like Woods and Cooper Kupp. And then after that, it's just kind of squishy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I just think that.
But they're sitting with, almost 25 million in dead cap for Jared Goff and another 8.5 for Todd Gurley.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they got to do what they got to do. I mean, Woods is getting older. He's the second oldest wide receiver in the division, besides AJ Green, who signed with Arizona. And then you've got Deshaun Jackson, who's right behind him as far as age, probably not going to have very much of an impact on the roster. Then you've got Cooper Kupp, who's been injured, so they actually need Deshaun Jackson in this roster to be available, to be just in case, and then they signed Atwell, I think, the second round pick, right after we chose Eskridge. It was kind of a consolation prize, I thought, more of a gadgety kind of guy, but it kind of fits into their style of, a guy like that. So, yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the division and you just look at it in terms of weapons and the defenses that are designed to stop those weapons, the NFC West is just loaded, top to bottom.
But if you look at think about the wide receiver,
just the wide receivers, it's just amazing.
Just the wide receiver room, I'd still give Seattle the nod. I mean, Metcalf is the most talented player in the division, with the exception of maybe Nuke Hopkins.
Well, let's take a look at it. So you got all the quarterbacks: Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and eventually Trey Lance. That's a good quarterback room right there. True. And then all the wide receivers: you got Hopkins, Kupp, Tyler Lockett, Woods, DK
Ayuk,
Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. You kind of count him, AJ Green, Rondale Moore, Dwayne Eskridge, Tutu Atwell, Van Jefferson, Will Disley, Tyler Higbee. And that's some serious talent and speed. There's a lot of speed in that list. And so you're putting a lot of pressure on defenses in this division, which makes it, to me, it's like the best division just from a sheer talent standpoint.
So I was talking with a friend at work about this very topic, and he is an Arizona Cardinals fan. Grew up in Phoenix, went to school down there, and so he's a big Arizona fan. And he was just like, you could say, he was just like, it's like, why do we have to be in the NFC West? And
yeah, and they're the team that's on the bubble to be on the bottom of the division, and they're not a bad team. I mean, this is probably a 9-win team or a 10-win team in any other division, and that's almost like a given level.
You put the Arizona Cardinals in, pick a division that's not the NFC West.
Yeah, replace them with, to send them to Houston, and they would clean up that division probably.
Yeah, they would. And so they'd in most divisions, I think Arizona wins that division, or if nothing else, they finish second. They get enough wins to get into the playoffs as a wild card team.
I totally agree.
But in this division, where you're looking at, them versus San Francisco versus the Rams versus Seattle, and you go, they might be the fourth best team in this division. And they're good enough to be a playoff team, especially with Kyler Murray at quarterback. I mean, I don't believe in their coach one bit, like not even the slightest bit. But Kyler Murray,
I don't know. I think they may end up turning the corner a little bit. I mean, Arizona started out before Kingsbury as 32nd in passing in DVOA in 2018, then 22nd with Kingsbury and Kyler Murray in Murray's first year, and then 12th last year. And they picked up, tight end Max. They have Max Williams re-signed. Christian Kirk is still there. They added Green. I don't know what he's got left in the tank. Hopkins had 1,200 yards last year and over 100 receptions. He's a chain mover guy. He's not going to be, taking the top off the defense, but nonetheless, he's one of the most dependable
Yeah.
I think he had 1,400 yards. So he had 115 catches for 1,400 yards last year in Arizona. Believe it or not, it just didn't seem like it, but that's how productive he was last year. They have an opportunity to do some damage if they are well coached. Like if they have the right mentality, they have enough talent to disrupt the other three teams in the division on any given Sunday.
So tell me about their offensive line.
So how about the Rams? let's go to the Rams. The Arizona needs to work on that. And it's tough because they're not that great. I mean, they have Brian Winters, Josh Jones from Houston, who was a draft pick that we thought was going to be in the back into the first round last year, ended up hanging on until the fourth round. DJ Humphries re-signed a deal this year to be their left tackle. Rodney Hudson they picked up from Oakland. Max Garcia is there. Kelvin Beachum. It's not. I think that they've improved, so it's not going to be as bad as it was last year. And if you give Kyler Murray another, half a second to operate, that could be the difference for him.
See, they're going about protecting Kyler Murray the same way that Seattle went about protecting totally Russell Wilson.
Keith. Absolutely.
Which is they're not going to do anything whatsoever to protect him. And they're saying, but he's super athletic and can make people miss. So it should work. And what that's going to do is it's going to lead to the same problem that Seattle had, which is a high variance offense. They're going to be great one week. They're going to just struggle to move the ball at all the next week. And it's all matchup dependent because they don't have the offensive line to really do the job. And you're just asking your quarterback to make up for it too much. Ultimately,
I like the roster building thing that Arizona is doing is they're trying to create a defense to do the really heavy lifting for the team and have an offense that's just good enough with a decent quarterback that could possibly win games at the end of games. We don't know yet for sure because he really hasn't been put in that position yet. But I do believe that he has that ability. He showed it in college. I think he's that kind of quarterback. He's that dynamic. The question is, do they have enough weapons and that offensive line is just good enough? They added James Conner at running back. They've got Eno Benjamin and Chase Edmonds. And then their wide receiver, you look at their wide receiver room and their tight ends. And it's just, like I really like Hopkins, right? But AJ Green is older. And everyone else is kind of improving. Christian Kirk is okay, but
AJ Green hasn't been good for a couple of years.
It's true,
but what he's going to bring them is what Larry Fitzgerald brought them last year. He's going to be steady. He's going to provide leadership. He's going to make not that many catches, but they'll be all for first downs on a third down. And he's just going to annoy the hell out of fans of other teams because he'll have 3 catches for, 19 yards, but 3 first downs.
Is Larry Fitzgerald going to play in 2021?
It does not look like it, no.
So, all right. So just off the top of your head, what's your kind of predicted finish? Where do you expect them to be in January of 2022?
8 or 9 wins.
Wow. That's going to get that coach fired.
And and unfortunately for the Seahawks, that means they'll turn around and hire a coach with actual coaching talent, and that team will take off next year.
I do like their GM. I mean, I really do. They've done actually a decent job.
Yeah, the GM's done a good job of shuffling the roster and getting guys in. Although I do think that if you look at like J.J. Watt, which was like their big time acquisition last year, a year ago it was Nuke Hopkins, but then this year it was J.J. Watt. I think you're going to see that there may not get as much out of him as his name implies because he has struggled the last couple of years to stay healthy and hasn't been that defensive player of the year guy he once was. So I still think he's very good, but I just don't think I don't think he's going to be where he's going to make everyone.
Well, and I really do like their defense. I mean, their defense is borderline top 10. And,
you think so?
Yeah. I mean, you got Marcus Golden there, Chandler Jones, Watt. If Watt produces double-digit sacks, not saying he will, not saying he won't, but if he does, along with Chandler Jones back there, who was injured most of the year.
Chandler Jones is, yeah.
And I just think that they have the ability. They have the ability to dictate terms to a lot of offenses. Now, maybe not the Seahawks. There's a few offenses where they're not going to stop, but they could limit. And it really is up to that offense to figure out how far that they get. Mm-hmm. And you're right. They may not have quite enough talent to
Buda Baker,
get them over the hump.
On the back end is where I think they're not good enough defensively. Buda Baker's back there. He's fantastic. I'm not talking about him, but the guy that's probably going to start at cornerback for him is Robert Alford, who honestly should be a nickel corner that plays 40% of the snaps, but he's probably going to start. That's not a great place to
Malcolm
be.
Butler.
Malcolm Butler.
I know he had a bad year.
He's a name because of a certain play in the Super Bowl, but
he's a decent slot guy.
He's a decent corner.
And you're right, like Byron Murphy and a couple of rookies is really what they've got. They're going to have somebody's going to have to step up on that back end in order for them to be decent. Their safety room is actually really good with Buda Baker and then Thompson and I can't remember the other guy's name.
Charles Washington,
Jalen Thompson, and Deontay Thompson. Both of those guys are, and Chris Miller's no slouch either. So the safeties are really good, but the corners are that could be a downfall type thing for their defense. Especially if you add Julio Jones to the Seahawks roster, there's just no stopping them. All right, so let's talk about what do you want to talk about? The 49ers or the Rams? Let's talk about the 49ers.
Yep.
Because last year they were decimated with injuries, and if they aren't decimated by injuries, I still think that this is an 11 or 12 win team, even with Garoppolo as quarterback. And talk to me about that. Tell me if you feel that. They picked up Alex Mack at center. They re-signed their left tackle. They still have a decent secondary that was probably outperformed where the expectations were last year. Trey Lance obviously may end up getting a shot at some point. Their running back room is really actually pretty good, and they picked up, I think, Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon in the draft, and I like their roster. I like their chances because it's essentially almost the same basic makeup of the roster that won 13 games just 2 years ago.
But I don't think that it is, because the team that won 13 games 2 years ago on defense had a healthy and active and very good Richard Sherman at cornerback. He's not on the team anymore. It had a defensive line that was much deeper and, quite frankly, more talented than what they've got this year.
They just didn't get a lot out of D Ford, did they?
They got nothing out of D Ford. And so now you're looking at, Eric Armstead's good, and he's going to be there. But you're looking at, Zach Kerr probably being a starter.
And some reclamation projects.
Yeah. And so Nick Bosa has to come in and play not just at a Pro Bowl level, but at an elite level, like a borderline.
And there's no reason that he wouldn't.
Has he ever?
Yeah, his rookie year was really good.
His rookie year was really good.
He had the ACL.
That's
it. I mean, that's all he's had.
And so,
And then
last year he didn't
Javon
play, and
Kinlaw is there. We haven't
who,
seen a lot out of him yet, but
yeah,
man, that guy could really step up.
he did not come in and do what everyone expected of him last year.
When you're exposed, so when you lose your premier guy, all of a sudden your job as an interior defensive guy is difficult.
Yes, it is.
And as a rookie, that's, the expectations just kind of have to go out the window. So I'm not going to write him off yet.
But so both the guys that started the year last year as their starting corners are gone. They're replaced by Jason Verrett, who came on, played pretty well last year, and earned himself an opportunity to be the starter, and Emmanuel Mosley, who has talent and can be pretty good, but neither of those guys is going to be Richard Sherman, who they were 2 years ago. I look at the roster isn't as good as it was when they won 13 games. They still have.
They've got a really decent wide receiver room, and of course George Kittle is a weapon. So
George Kittle's fantastic.
Depending on Garoppolo and whether he can throw the ball any better than he did 2 years ago.
You think their wide receiver room is good?
I see a lot of potential there, and there's guys that are older that need to step up. I mean, Travis Benjamin obviously has not stepped up in the last couple of years, but I thought that was a pretty decent pickup for them. Jalen Hurd was a second round pick last year. I think he got an ACL in practice or whatever, didn't even play last year. So that's a big gift to them this year.
He's a wild card. I think he could be good, but
Ayuk and Samuel, 230 pounds. That's a pretty decent wild card.
Yeah, I mean, Ayuk and Samuel give them great guys on the outside.
Poor Samuel, he plays so physical, it just beats him up.
Yep, and then after that, I don't see
Mohamed Sanu is he's old, but he can give you
and he
500 yards.
He didn't do much of anything last year. He was a major disappointment. And then Jalen Hurd's he's the wild card, because what are you going to get out of him? He was a rookie last year, but had an ACL. So he's coming back from an ACL injury, which is never easy.
Brandon Ayuk,
lots of talent.
Obviously, dude. I mean, that guy's a talent.
Well, that's what I mean. Ayuk and Samuel, that fantastic.
Yes.
Everybody else in that wide receiver room,
I would think that they probably would have brought in another guy. Now they did. You look at the Mohamed Sanu signing as kind of a hedge on Jalen Hurd, but Jalen Hurd could easily eclipse him as the third wide receiver, and then you add George Kittle to that. That's four nice weapons for the offense to move the chains. I'm not saying it's going to be a world-changing kind of down the field offense. You're not going to have that with Garoppolo, but you add Trey Lance to that mix. All of a sudden, a guy like Brandon Ayuk becomes way more important to your offense, and Travis Benjamin all of a sudden starts running down the sideline for you a little bit more. So
I don't know if Travis Benjamin makes this roster.
That's true.
This
is not a great roster. This is we'll look at the Rams in a second, but this could be the worst wide receiver. This could be the worst talent on, for your weapons in the division.
And any team that has Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle isn't going to be that bad as far as the weapons, and Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I don't want to overstate this. I think this team has a lot of talent, and they're very dangerous, and they're going to piss me off at so many different instances this year.
Oh, they can go steal some games for sure.
But ultimately, they're running Jimmy Garoppolo or a rookie at quarterback, and they are they've got that, and they just don't have the depth they used to.
Possibly and start get a starting spot at corner. I mean, nobody saw him play in 2020, but he was a guy that came into the Senior Bowl and was really attractive to a guy like Nagy, as the Senior Bowl executive, who really liked Ambry Thomas. In fact, we had talked about him being a possibility for the Seahawks in the mid rounds. So a guy like that is maybe a guy to watch. And then they picked up a couple of linemen that I like, offensive linemen. Aaron Banks is a beast of an offensive guard. I think he comes in and probably starts right away.
They need him to start, because if he doesn't start, they're running Laken Tomlinson out there again. And Tomlinson is good, at blocking in a phone booth and the guy right in front of him. But the guy's got no mobility, no ability to pull, no ability to.
And we talked about the defensive backs being kind of a weakness. They picked up Talanoa Hufanga out of USC, the safety, and they picked up Lenore from Oregon, which I thought is a really decent value guy. I think he probably end up. I don't have their draft order, but he probably ended up going the 5th or 6th round.
He went in the fifth round, pick 21, and
so that's a decent pickup. And those guys aren't going to make the team, like Thomas and Lenore and Hufanga. So that really, I think that adds to the talent. No, those guys might not show until halfway through the season, but I think that improves their defensive backs a little bit.
So, I mean, that the big question mark for them is quarterback, because Garoppolo is.
Yeah. Well, that's going to hang.
Yeah.
That's going to hang over their team for a while too, because it's going to end up being one of those controversy things, because Garoppolo will have marginal games. Garoppolo is a kind of quarterback that will throw for 110 yards and be 7 of 10 in a few games.
Yeah.
And when that happens, or he throws 3 interceptions, the call for Lance to be the quarterback or have an opportunity that drumbeat is going to get louder and louder as the season goes on. But if they win, if San Francisco does what they did 2 years ago and they just end up winning, and they get to November and they've got 10 wins, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Garoppolo will stay.
So Garoppolo started 6 games last year, threw for 1,100 yards, 182.7 yards per game.
Yeah, he's a game manager. Yeah, he's not a guy that's going to take you when you're down by 10 with 7 minutes to go in a game. He's not going to score twice to get you the game.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
He's just not that guy.
All right, let's talk about the Rams.
Okay.
I'm really interested to feel this Rams team out with Matthew Stafford at quarterback. Like, how does it change the team significantly enough in order to remake their chances to retake the division again and be supreme in the division?
It really does, because the upgrade from Jared Goff, who is a below average NFL quarterback, to Matthew Stafford, who is a top 10 NFL quarterback, is massive. And
I agree.
To make it at the most important position on a football team, to go from below average to top 10, everything else gets easier. Matthew Stafford makes that big of a difference. And that's why
is the Rams defense good enough? Right? Because
that's the question.
Because Matthew Stafford is going to make a mistake now and again. He's always been that guy. He's a slinger a little bit, not terribly inaccurate, but he will make those mistakes. He's not a terribly mobile guy either, so he's going to make some pressure errors. When he does that, is their defense good enough to get the offense back out on the field?
At times. I mean, you've got anytime you've got Aaron Donald out there, you're gonna your defense isn't going to be completely terrible because he makes that big of a difference on his own. And Jalen Ramsey is fantastic, but overall their depth is not quite what you'd want, and they can't, because they've got $25 million of their cap space not used. It applies to Jared Goff. And so you can't, that's the type of money that you would need for those second tier guys. You could get 3 of those second tier guys that could come in and be major playmakers for you, that they just don't have, because that money is sitting there with Goff. And then another, $8 million with, Gurley. So that's 4 key players on a roster that you're going to not have
Mm-hmm.
because of the money there, or, 3 key players and 2 really important rotation guys on the defensive line. I mean, that's how big it is that they have all that dead money. They're one of those teams that's going to be super dangerous, and then they're just not going to be able to hold on at times because they just don't have the depth. They're just not going to have the depth this year. Now that on defense, honestly, they've got Aaron Donald.
Yeah. Well, they picked up Bobby Brown. He was an underrated interior defensive lineman. Ernest Brown as well. I like both those guys, but those guys are both rookies.
4th and a 5th round pick.
And both of them are totally undersized,
mm-hmm.
Which means they're going to be pass rusher kind of guys. There's no threat yet at that point.
Yeah.
Robert Rochelle was a corner that they'd picked up in the draft that we both really liked, kind of a 4th round guy.
Yep.
So, he's a 4th round guy for a reason. I think that he's got some things to work on. They still have Jalen Ramsey, obviously, but he's just one guy. So for me, I think I agree with you in that. And they lost their premier safety, Johnson, in free agency. And Keith, I think one of the most underrated things about the Rams that they lost this year was almost their entire coaching staff. Like they turned over a ton of coaches. They just got pilfered, in the offseason, including our very own offensive coordinator
and offensive line.
But they lost their offensive coordinator. They lost their defensive guy retired, right? And so it'll be interesting to see like what happens with that. So, and then you look at the Seahawks. Okay. So now that we've had the conversations about those teams, you really take a look at the Seahawks and what they were able to do this offseason, which was actually just incredible for me. Because it could have gone either way, especially during the 6 weeks where the Russell Wilson trade talk was right at the height of everyday news. It could have been a disaster for an offseason in Seattle, even with or without the trade. Like we didn't have any cap money. We only had 4 draft picks coming into free agency. We had, very little very little cap space, and we were losing a ton of free agents, and we were going to have to cut, Carlos Dunlap, and who knows how that would have worked out. Were we going to keep our corner, all that kind of stuff? And I'll be doggone if it just didn't work out about as good as it possibly could have gone. I mean, considering all the things that could have gone wrong, almost everything went right.
Yep. Jerron Reed left. The 2 starting corners, at least starting on the depth chart. Really, it was Griffin and someone who shouldn't have played. But
Dunbar had a bad knee all year.
But they lost some guys, but they were able, in doing that, they were able to keep Dunlap. They were able to add Jackson on the offensive line. They were allowed to bring Carson back. They were able to, do some other stuff in there where they just continued to add. And they really were able to solidify all these different spots that we were worried about, whether it be bringing guys back or whether it was, replacing them. And like Aleko Witherspoon, right, is at corner. Like,
I just saw some video of him in practice, and he looks really good.
He does,
and he looked good in a little cut up too that I saw of highlights from just last year. He's a pretty sticky guy and very physical. I think the folks are going to be happy with him. Now he may get beaten some coverage now and again, but I think people will like him because of the physical nature and the way he plays and his length and so forth. I really do believe that he has some good makeup speed and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be fine. I mean, he was. He went into last year as the starter in San Francisco and dealt with an ankle injury, I believe it was, that humbled him. So he played through some of it, but not as well because, well, if you ever tried to run on a hurt ankle, you'd understand. And, ended up having it kind of a down year. But it was a down year caused by injury, not a down year caused by work ethic or talent or those kind of things. So he is.
He's gonna need. I think he's a penciled in starter to me.
Absolutely, I think he's a penciled in starter.
Yeah, because or it's Trey Flowers comes in and surprises. Like somehow or another, he developed in the offseason and nobody knew about it, and all of a sudden he came in and he could actually play.
True.
Otherwise, you're depending on a rookie and Trey Brown to come in. Now, coach is going to give him an opportunity to compete, but that's probably not going to end up being this year. He's going to get some reps. Pierre Desir's kind of, I'm not going to say completely washed, but he's a little bit of a washed player. And then you just got a bunch of guys. Ryan Neal is kind of, I don't know if he has the speed to really play outside corner. So he's more of a big slot guy.
Yep. Corner's the weakness in Seattle. Their offense, their defensive line's good. Their linebackers are good. And their safeties are good, but they're going to struggle a little bit at corner. But we don't know. This may not be the team that they can run out on. Keith. I mean, they could still go find another guy. They could still bring Richard Sherman in.
They could. Yeah, the market might dry up to the point where Richard Sherman either comes in for $4 or $5 million, or he doesn't play. Which I think Richard Sherman
isn't healthy enough to pass a physical.
Wow, haven't heard that before.
Is why he is not signed. And that it's okay. It's June 1st.
Yeah, we'll give him another couple months. We'll see.
He's got another couple months to get there, but once he's ready, once he's in shape and ready to play and can pass the physical, I think he signs with someone. And it's not going to be for $15-20 million that he's played for the last couple of years. It's going to be for $5 million.
It's going to be so hard seeing KJ Wright and Richard Sherman playing from for twice Baltimore. The veteran minimum or whatever. Just like, oh my gosh, the fallen. Okay, so
I still think KJ Wright plays in Seattle next year.
So let's quickly go through the roster. Like the defensive line seems to be a real strength. Now, granted, if we do the Julio Jones thing and we ship out a player or whatever, it diminishes a little bit. But nonetheless, one player is not going to defeat that defensive line. We are, however, dependent upon a group of players stepping up and playing, because you mentioned last week, where's the star? Where's the guy that's going to close games for you and so forth? That's the issue with the defensive line, but I don't think it's a huge issue as long as everyone plays as a unit.
Dunlap is the star.
Yes.
But that's it. You know what I mean? Like they need.
Alton Robinson's a potential star. Alden Smith could give you something if he plays. Darrell Taylor, we just don't know, but he could.
Yeah, and so you're hoping that of the bunch of options, which all of them could, you just need one. You need one of them to step up and play like a star.
I think that's likely. Or a group of 2 or 3 guys that are part of a rotation that really play, do. Like each guy has 4 or 5 sacks. I mean, I would accept that too, because then there's really no drop off. You're just kind of playing a really nice, solid unit, and I'll take that defense.
Yeah.
How about linebacker? You mentioned KJ Wright. You think KJ Wright is going to play for the Seahawks?
I think KJ Wright plays for Seattle. I think the longer this goes, the more he comes back to Seattle for another year, another shot at another Super Bowl.
What does that do to the playing time of the roster as it stands?
Honestly, I don't think it changes it much.
What happens to Darrell Taylor?
He plays more defensive end.
Okay.
Because KJ Wright had a great year last year, but he was never the fastest linebacker. That was never a strength of his. And he does not look like the same guy as far as speed. So they're going to sub him out. They're going to get Brooks in there more, so that way they have that speed out there. He's going to be in and out. He's going to be like that linebacker who comes off when they go to the nickel, and be veteran leader and a guy that can play if somebody else gets hurt. But going into the year, he would be that guy. And so, Darrell Taylor, instead of having those reps at strong side linebacker, he's on the sideline for those, and then but he will still come in for his pass rush. His reps at defensive end. I think that it decreases.
And he would play some reps at strong side. I mean, they would work him in just so that next year he's ready to roll.
Yeah. And so it comes down to that. And it just gives you some more depth and some, kind of some injury hedge against, everybody. And
if there's no trades and no movement at all, and we go into the season with the current roster, which defensive ends get cut? So you've got LJ Collier, who's in the third year of a 4-year contract with a 5th-year option. Carlos Dunlap, who just signed a 2-year deal. Rasheem Green, who's on the end of his rookie deal.
He's the guy who gets cut.
Hyder, Mayoa. Mayoa's deal is, limited guarantees. Alton Robinson, you're not going to cut that guy. Alden Smith is a guy with a minimum contract that could probably be cut.
Minimum contract and in legal issues, so he may or may not play.
Even make it to camp. We just don't know. So that's it.
Yeah.
And then you've got a bunch of defensive tackles: Miles Adams, Puna Ford, Jared Hewitt, Cedric Lattimore, Brian Monet, Robert Kimdichie, Al Woods. So between everyone I just mentioned, you're going to keep a maximum of 10.
Okay. Obviously, you're keeping Puna, you're keeping Monet, you're keeping Woods, right? That's your primary defensive tackle rotation. Right. You're keeping Dunlap, Taylor, Robinson, Collier, Hyder, and probably Mayoa. And then you're like, okay, so that's
one more.
That's 9.
8 or 9, yeah.
And so you want someone else,
You might go into the season with 9.
You might go into the season with 9.
But you also on how the offensive line works and how the safeties and who plays.
You might want an inside pass rusher, someone that can play more on the inside, and a guy like
I heard they like Miles Adams
or Robert Kimdichie or
Cedric
one of those guys makes the roster as the 10th guy.
Yeah, boy, if Robert Kimdichie works out, that would just be amazing.
If he could ever live up to his draft status.
Well, I wouldn't even want that at this point. If he could live up to a nice rotational role where he could get 3 or 4 sacks on the year and replace some of that Jaron Reed productivity, I would take that. All right, so let's switch gears and go to the offense. We already know the wide receiver room. We talked about it extensively at the top. The tight ends, I think we kind of touched on that as well with Gerald Everett and Disley and so forth. What do you expect, though, from Colby Parkinson this year as far as a contribution level with the way that the roster is stacked at other position groups?
Honestly, when they went out and signed a tight end, and that you've got Disley, who blocks like a tackle and moves better than I would have ever dreamed after watching his college tape. Even with the 2 major injuries, he still moves better than I would have dreamed after watching his college tape. I don't know. I don't know what we can expect from Colby Parkinson. I don't know what they end up doing. Now, he might end up being in a situation where he plays himself into a role, and you see less of either Everett or Disley because you want a guy that's got a little bit more that height, his ability to go up and get the ball, just more of that gigantic target, and less, okay, so it doesn't matter that he doesn't move as well as Everett, and he doesn't block as well as
he does move. Yeah,
he does move. He doesn't, but you know what I'm saying? Like
he's not premier athletic, but he's pretty damn athletic for a 6'7", 251 guy.
Yeah. And, so he can play himself into a role, but I think when they went and signed Everett, what they were saying is Parkinson still has to prove something to us. He's not guaranteed anything because we want 2 tight ends. We have 2 tight ends.
What do you think is up with the latest little signing that probably came under the radar for most folks? Cam Sutton is a 6'6", 226-pound rookie, undrafted free agent guy out of Fresno State that they brought in. Now, I don't expect anything, obviously. They don't even have his picture up on his roster picture on the website.
An undrafted free agent who doesn't sign in April.
Weird. So the size is intriguing to me. So 6'6", 226. So if that guy runs a sub 4.5.
That's a big wide receiver.
Yeah. That's interesting, though. I mean, they have him listed at tight end. He's a tight end, but if somehow or another this guy somehow has some speed, that could kind of be an interesting equation for the practice squad going forward.
Yeah,
just a name,
and that's where he fits in as the practice squad. We're talking about an undrafted player signing, at the end of May, not in April after the draft, but at the end of May, when all 32 teams have had a chance to sign him for a month, and then he finally gets he gets his phone number called.
So
I'm not. You can. Yeah, he's got that size and whatever, but can he play football?
Right. So before we finish with the offensive line, I want to talk about the running backs just really quick, only because it just seems like a big thing for Pete Carroll. We want to increase our efficiency running the ball. We want to run the ball better. And quite frankly, we want to run the ball more. All right. So all of those criteria are now established for the running back room. And when you take a look at the room, Alex Collins, DJ Dallas, they've got a couple undrafted guys in Edmonds and Josh Johnson, Travis Homer, Rashad Penny, Chris Carson. Is that room stacked enough where you're totally comfortable?
Yes.
Okay. So offensive line. Is
you're just going to leave it. You're going to leave it at that with the one word answer.
Well, you already said that you win every argument, so I'm not even going to try. We'll just leave it there. Well, here's what I was thinking. We're going to talk. We'll probably end up having a larger conversation about the running backs.
Yep.
As we get closer to camp, and so we'll just leave that conversation for another time. But I wanted to talk briefly about the offensive line, just because we brought in a guy that needs to get integrated into the line in Gabe Jackson. And then, everything else looks okay. I mean, starter wise, I'm okay with our starters.
You still have Dwayne Brown, who's a Pro Bowler. You've got Damian Lewis, was a revelation last year, who's going to move from right to left, but whatever. It's not a thing.
That'll be interesting. We'll have to talk about that. Not today, but
it's for a guard. It's really not that big of a deal, especially a young guard.
Well, it seems to me like it might be, only because of the Shane Waldron equation. Now, Shane Waldron brought his
guard. He played left guard in college.
Now, your left guard normally, though, you want to be a little bit more athletic than your right guard typically, and so he was. Is that true? A. And B,
no.
Is there any real difference other than just thinking more in a left-handed way versus a right-handed way and moving one way? You kind of auto-correct yourself to the point where when you start the season, you're pretty well set. But, it is a process to kind of switch sides, I would imagine.
It's a lot of practice time between and preseason games
and mental reps and everything, right?
Yeah, so I'm not worried about, especially as a young guy who played some left tackle or left guard in college. I look more at Gabe Jackson, who's been a right guard for years in the pros, hasn't moved around. For him, all that muscle memory is going to be harder to break, and so that's why they decided to put him at right guard. And also, you look at what he does, his pass blocking, his movement in space, and all those things. If they really wanted it to be the right side is the grinder power, and the left side's the more pass blocking, more agile, they would have left Lewis on the right and made Jackson move, but they didn't. They left Jackson on the right and made Lewis move because I don't think they care. I think this is going to be. You got Russell Wilson at quarterback. It doesn't have to be a right-handed running game. You can run either direction. They're that, he's good, and it just isn't a concern for me. But I think the fact that you brought in one of the best guards in the NFL to replace what was the weakest spot on your line. So you took the weakest spot on your offensive line and made it arguably the best spot on your offensive line. And I know Dwayne Brown's going to take exception to that, but Dwayne Brown's way more valuable because he plays a more valuable position. But as far as actual quality versus the rest of the NFL, man, Jackson's going to be there. Shell's still kind of a placeholder. Abuahe is going to be the swing guy. It's the same guys as last year. Postic and center, it's the same guy as last year. So, yeah, they took the weakest spot on their line, which was one of the guards, and they made it a massive strength. And that's all it would have been nice if they got a better center.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of the tackle depth?
You're right.
The you look at the tackle
depth is better
depth,
than last year.
It looks okay. And then the center is just it's kind of weird that we didn't address it better for me, but I understand that you're going to have a position now and again that's your weakest position. You always have to assign a weakest position, and it just happens to be that. And really, when you take a look at Postic as a starter, he's average, and you're not going to have premier Pro Bowler guys at every spot on your entire team. And if you are going to have a weakness, at least his weaknesses aren't the basics. Like, he can basically block. He can basically call line plays. He can basically snap the ball effectively to Russell Wilson, and he can move in space. So he does the job basically okay, right? And so I'm okay with him.
He's going to be better in this offense than he was in Shoddy's offense, because Shoddy's offense asked him to line up and just push the guy in front of him a lot after snapping the ball.
As strong as he needs to be to do that.
No, and in Waldron's offense, he's going to be moving more laterally. He's like, okay, get the guy in front of you, get the nose tackle to move his feet and move laterally, so that way there's a cutback lane for the running back. And
let's talk about this for just a second. So help me understand the technical requirements in a zone blocking scheme that's different from what Solari ran last year, that adapts slightly to a more wide zone situation. So are you talking about players with initial blocks or moving all coordinated in one direction and sliding then off to block at a second level? How does it all kind of work and look different?
Okay, so in Solari's, it was based mostly on the inside zone, which is that where you start out with double teams on the inside, and then one of the players is assigned to move off and block. So it's like you're running to the right, you always block the person to your right. And if there's no one there, then you turn inside and double team that first player, and then step out. Are you trying
to move the defensive man in a direction that he's trying to go, or are you trying to counter him and move him off his spot and force him to go where you want him to go?
A little of both. If you can get him to move, fine. If not, just push him out of the way. Just wash him out of the play. And that's if they want to go really hard in one direction, let them, and just wash them out of the play so they're not there. And so, but it's kind of choreographed in that you're trying to, I block this person, then I pull off, or I block this person and you better help me, and then you better pull off. And
there's a sense of timing with that too. They hold it for a certain.
Yep. Time. And there's certain rules and all, and as far as who's blocking who and all of that.
And then the running backs key off that. And so the whole thing just kind of works together.
There's certain keys that the running back has to see. Okay, I'm looking at this block, and if it's blocking out, I go in, and if it's going in, I go out, and you have to key off those individual blocks and then let your talent, go. So with the outside zone, it's different. With the outside zone, what you have is you have your tackle and your guard on the backside. Their job is to just stop the player, right? Just either wash them out, wide, if that's where they want to go, then in the opposite direction of the running plane. You go, okay, fine, you do that. In the old days of the Denver running backs, they would cut block and put them on the ground. Now it's more just stop them from moving laterally. On the front side, your tackle and your guard and your center, you want to push them wide. So if you're running right, you want to push them as far out to the right as you can. And so you wash them up. So the left side is stuck where they are, and the right side is pushed out, and you end up with these big holes caused by creating lateral movement rather than vertical movement. And
so in Shane Waldron's deal, where every play is available in multiple play calls, and so the same formations are available in both run plays and pass plays, which helps disguise one or the other and so forth. So there's that, and then there's is our offensive line with the personnel that we have the ability to complete the assignments?
I think so. And this is why I said I think Postic's better suited for this outside zone running than he was for the inside zone running. Because he, when he was asked to block someone, maybe he had Lewis helping him, but the moment Lewis would peel off to go to the second level, he's overmatched, right? And so in the inside zone. In the outside zone, if they're trying to run right and his guy goes towards his left shoulder, okay, just let him go. Don't leave him and don't block him. But you just let him wash himself out of the play. And if he goes to the right side of you, you just get his feet moving and you keep them moving right, and you keep going and going and going. And then the running back uses your block as the key and they cut back. So we call it outside zone. But that doesn't mean they're running outside the tackle. It means they start out running like they're going to run outside the right tackle, but the right tackle, the right guard, and the center all push their guys out there. And the point where they plant their foot and make that cutback, they're outside where the right tackle is when they line up, but the lane when they go through could be between the left guard and the center, because that's how far out those guys have moved. Jackson is built for that. Postic is built for that. Shell, I think, is athletic enough to do that. I think it'll work. I honestly think that it's a better fit for the talent than what they had.
So how does it fit with the running backs? Really quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Honestly, I don't know.
So is this ideally suited for the style that Chris Carson has?
No. Chris Carson excelled in the inside zone
to be kind of a one.
I believe he can.
One cut guy.
I believe he can. He's talented enough. I think he can. Penny, I think, has the potential to excel at this because.
I agree with Penny, but I'll get back to Carson just for half a second. Carson is extremely explosive, so he may not have the top end gear to break away, after 10 yards, but I think if given the opportunity to one cut and go, I think that he could explode through those holes with a lot of power. And I still think that and if he ends up with larger running lanes than he did prior, he's still going to be massively effective.
Yeah. I mean, the concept of the outside zone run is designed to put the running back one-on-one with the backside linebacker. So the linebacker coming in from the backside. So if you're running right, it's the linebacker that lined up on the left. The goal is to put the running back one-on-one with that player, and you expect your running back to win most of the time.
Yeah.
And Carson
coming up and filling a hole.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the safety's coming up. There's that too. But against that linebacker, against that safety, one-on-one, Carson's going to win that. He's going to kill people. That's what he does. He runs guys over.
Yeah, he's the guy that trucks people. He doesn't avoid contact.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Penny.
See, Penny's got what Penny has is more speed. And so his ability to stretch that play out and be really patient and wait for the blocks to do what they need to do.
It fits the style that he came from San Diego State.
Yep. And then accelerate, not around the corner, but put his foot down and accelerate through the hole that maybe you had to wait a little bit for it to develop, and then accelerate through it. And once he gets past the line of scrimmage with his speed, he could be gone.
So, everyone has the same issue with Penny, and we all know what that is. Are any of his injuries related to the point where you're concerned about injuries with him?
So,
or are they just
the knee injuries? The knee injuries concerning every player in every position, right? I mean, that's just what it is.
He's had enough time though.
But yeah, I mean, it took it was a bad injury, and so he didn't come back until late in the season last year. But he didn't get re-injured. He's been healthy this entire offseason.
So he's going to get his ass off too, which was actually impressive.
He's going to get he has the entire offseason, not just to be working to get back on the field and get ready to play, but now he's having this offseason to really work on himself and really work on his game, his knowledge of the offense, his ability to be
psyched up to get into Shane Waldron's wheelhouse and in this thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a good fit for him, but if he goes out in the first couple of games and gets hurt again, the team needs to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. Knocking on the wood for sure. All right. Next week, we're going to have some guests. We've been back and forth on this to try to schedule these guys in, but Sammy and George Jojor from Sports on Tap and all of their affiliate websites are going to come on, and it's going to be a broad, wide-ranging conversation about football and sports in general and culture and their website and what they're trying to do. And it's a pretty cool conversation. So I would get back in here and listen to that. We're also going to be talking about players on the Seattle's roster, specifically players that are new to the team, and kind of get to know your new Seahawks. So we'll kind of go through those guys and maybe a couple of guys that we think might have the best chance to make the roster off the undrafted list. So, and
I'm going to be asking them, out of all the 32 NFL stadiums in the league, which one has the best beer selection? Because these are the types of guys that will have an opinion on that.
And those are the questions that we will be asking.
Those are the questions that need to be answered.
No metaphysical type questions. These are purely the important questions that all fans want to know about being a fan and participating in the fandom of just being a fan.
Is there any place other than Seattle and Foxborough, which is Boston, that has clam chowder that is as good as Ivar's?
Yeah.
I think those two are the only two you're gonna find it.
So side story, now that you mentioned Ivers. So my 15-year-old is going to I'm gonna travel to the Northwest in July, and we're gonna do a live show with Dan Viens of the Emerald City Sportscast. We're gonna do it, I think, at a public place, at a bar. We'll have as many of you that we can invite, and we'll fit into this thing. But part of the deal is my son would like to accompany me. He's 15 years old. I don't know if he can get into the bar or not, but he doesn't care. He will sit outside on the sidewalk for however many hours it takes for us to do the job, as long as that I will take him to Ivers down on Pier 51 or whatever it is, in Seattle on the waterfront to get the fish and chips and the chowder, because
you gotta get a bowl of the chowder. If the fish and chips are great, they're fantastic. Fish and chips are amazing. The fish and chips are fantastic, but if you skip the chowder, you're missing out. Don't do that.
All right. So come back, join us next week. Thanks, Keith. You did win every argument. I'm just gonna point that out.
I don't think we had an argument.
No, that's what makes it funny.
Yeah,
it's like. All right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook, SeahawksPlaybook.com. Go check it out. I redesigned the entire website. I did all of it. And I think it looks okay, but you guys go check it out and let us know what you think. And I'm wide open to any suggestions.
You did a fantastic job on the website.
Thank you.
It looks amazing.
It looks better than it did. It used to be just a single column blog with a right sidebar thing. Kind of boring.
Yeah. Now
it's like, it's better.
It's much better.
And find us on your favorite podcast app and YouTube. So subscribe. We need more subscribers. I think we only have 64 subscribers on YouTube. It'd be really cool by the end of the summer to get it way over 100. So let's work on that.
Most people are still listening to the audio podcast. I think it's because they have to look at me if they do the YouTube one. And
you're lovely, dude. you're just totally fine. Come on, right? I mean, and look at the background that you have, and with the closet door and that circle thing, like in the back.
It's a Seahawk wreath that I leave up year round.
Wreath. Yeah. Like you're into it, man. Right? You have green on your headphones.
I do.
That right there there's the logo. Like, come on.
I mean, I've got a picture of the stadium. I've got the Super Bowl trophy. I've got the CenturyLink night picture over here from
and if people
Anthony
zoom
May,
in,
if you want to see that. But nobody can see those things.
Video. Yeah, but if people zoom in close enough on your forehead, you can see the reflections of those things.
All right, let's get out of here.
All right. We'll see you next time, and go Hawks.
Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.